Tiffany stood in the small hallway of her run-down inn. The ceiling dripped near a thin crack. Her arms felt tired. She had been up for most of the night, trying to keep the place from looking worse than it already did. The wooden floor creaked under her feet when she turned. She needed to check the lobby before dawn. She hoped no one would notice the stains on the walls or the musty smell of old coffee that lingered in the air. She walked into the lobby, passing by a row of old chairs that felt shaky whenever anyone sat. She pressed her hand against one of them, testing its balance. It wobbled. She sighed. In a corner, an old coffee maker hissed. She had brewed a pot around midnight. The bitter smell filled the space, covering the damp odor that rose from the old rug. She would serve it if a guest arrived early, but that rarely happened now. Outside, she heard a scraping sound near the porch. She moved to the window and pushed aside a faded curtain. The mayor stood across the street, leaning on a fence, talking quietly with someone. She recognized his forced smile and the way he gestured toward her building. He did not come closer, but she knew what he wanted. He had offered to buy her place at a low price. He pretended to be concerned for her safety. She never trusted him. "Just leave me alone," Tiffany said quietly, though he could not hear her. She went outside to the porch, the boards creaking under her weight. The mayor looked up and raised a hand, calling out in a calm but firm tone. "Tiffany," the mayor said from across the street, "this building could collapse any day now. You should consider my offer. I can ensure you get a fair price." She swallowed and stared at him. "I'm not interested," she said. Her voice shook. She tried to steady it. "Stop hanging around here at night. It doesn't help." The mayor shrugged. "Accidents happen. Tiffany, be careful. I'll be back." He turned and walked away. She returned inside and locked the door. She stood in the lobby, thinking about her late mother. The inn had once been a decent place. Her mother never bowed to anyone. Tiffany wanted to honor that memory, but things had grown complicated. Now, people whispered that she brought bad luck. Ever since her mother passed, the town had taken a strange turn. There were sudden water shortages, broken windows along Main Street, and rumors pointing at Tiffany's inn as the source of trouble. She moved behind the small front desk and opened an old ledger. Bills piled up. Her hand shook as she thought about selling, but she could not do that. Not yet. She heard footsteps outside on the porch. A knock sounded on the door. She tensed, expecting to see the mayor again. Instead, a man in a red shirt leaned forward, pressing his face to the glass. He looked about 30, with a camera hanging from his neck. She noticed his calm eyes. He tapped gently. She opened the door a few inches. "Hi," he said. "I'm sorry to bother you so early. Are you renting rooms?" Tiffany narrowed her eyes. "It's late. I mean, early. I don't have many guests nowadays." The man shrugged. "I need a place to stay." "I can pay in cash." The sign out front said, "You have vacancies." She had forgotten the old sign. It hung from a rusted nail, barely visible under the dim porch light. She sized him up. He looked like a traveler, not a local. Maybe he had no idea about the gossip. She needed the money, though. She tried to keep her voice steady. "Sure," she said. "It's not fancy, but I have a room." "Perfect," he said, stepping in and looking around the lobby. He wrinkled his nose slightly at the smell, but he said nothing. He admired the old photographs on the walls. He touched the faded curtains. He nodded, as if he understood something she did not. "I'm Robert," he said, offering his hand. "Tiffany," she replied, shaking it. She found the warmth of his hand reassuring, though she barely knew him. Robert glanced at the chairs, the creaking boards, and then the ledger on the desk. "How long have you owned this place?" "Since my mother passed," Tiffany said. "I'm just trying to keep it going." He tilted his head. "Rough neighborhood." She shrugged. "Not always. Lately, things have been hard. People talk. The mayor wants my property. He thinks I should sell." Robert set his camera down on the desk and looked at her. "Why don't you sell?" "Because it's my place," she said flatly. "My family's place. I'm not handing it over to him." Robert nodded, rubbing his chin. "I respect that." He paused, eyeing a photograph. "Who is that?" He pointed to an old black-and-white picture of Tiffany's mother standing outside the inn. Years ago. "My mother," Tiffany said. "She would never have sold. She built this inn when no one else thought it would matter." Robert nodded. "I see. Could I take that room now? I'm a bit tired. We can talk later if you like." Tiffany took a small key from a hook on the wall. She handed it to him and showed him down the narrow hall. He walked quietly, taking in each detail. He never made a face at the peeling wallpaper or the dim lighting. He just followed her lead. When she left him at his door, he smiled. "Thank you, Tiffany. This place has character." She returned to the lobby and stood by the desk. The night was almost over. She felt something unusual stirring in her gut. Robert's arrival might mean nothing, but it could also mean something different. She was not sure which. She sat in a rickety chair, waiting for the sun to rise, wondering what would happen next. Tiffany pushed open the lobby door and stepped onto the porch. The morning air felt damp. The sun had not fully risen, but there was enough light to see the damage from the night before. She noticed red paint smeared across a wooden post. One of the chairs lay overturned. She crouched and touched the sticky paint with her fingertips. It came off on her skin. She rubbed it against her thumb and frowned. Someone had been here after midnight. She heard footsteps behind her and turned. Robert stood at the doorway, watching quietly. He wore the same red shirt, and his camera hung around his neck. He looked at the paint, then at Tiffany's face. "Vandalism?" he asked in a calm tone. "Looks like it," she said, standing up. "It's been happening around town. Broken windows, smashed signs, strange things. People are blaming me for it. They think my inn brings trouble." He raised his eyebrows. "That doesn't make sense." "Of course it doesn't." She walked to the edge of the porch and peered down the street. Few people were out, but a man stood at the corner, glaring at her. She recognized him as one of the mayor's men. He had spread rumors about her, claiming that her poor maintenance and negligence somehow caused the town's problems. She turned back to Robert. "Why are you here? You're a photographer, right?" Robert shrugged. "I came to explore. I heard there are old buildings with history here. I didn't expect all this tension." Tiffany wiped her hands on a rag. "We have history, all right. My mother built this place. It's been in my family for a long time, but now everyone wants me gone." She looked at him, trying to read his face. "You said you respect that I won't sell. Do you really understand, or are you just passing through?" Robert leaned on the porch railing. "I like old stories. Places like this matter. Maybe I can help you get the attention you need. What if we set up a small photo exhibit? People might come see the real value of this inn." Tiffany stared at him. "A photo exhibit? Here." He nodded. "Why not? People like authenticity. If I show them the culture behind this place, maybe they'll think twice before believing lies. Before Tiffany could respond, a shout came from across the street. A woman ran past, saying something about contaminated water in the town's main cistern. Tiffany stiffened. Another problem. More panic. More rumors. Robert tilted his head. "What's going on?" Tiffany shook her head. "No idea. But people will blame me somehow. They always do." Suddenly, a short man in a city official's badge approached the porch. He handed Tiffany a folded note and spoke with a sneer. "You've got a new set of fines," he said. "Unsafe conditions, possible health code violations. Might want to consider the mayor's offer before this place gets shut down." He turned on his heel and left, snickering as he went. Tiffany clenched her jaw and shoved the note into her pocket. Her hands shook. She could not afford more fines. Robert touched her arm gently. "This is getting serious. Why are they doing this to you?" Tiffany paced a few steps. "My guess is the mayor wants my property cheap. He's been pushing me for weeks. Whenever I show any sign of holding on, something happens. Now they say I'm at fault for the town's issues. This is crazy." Robert adjusted his camera strap. "Listen, Tiffany, I'm not just here to take pictures for fun. I see what's going on. Let me help. Let me find out who's behind this. We can prove you're not to blame." She narrowed her eyes. "And why would you help me?" He looked straight at her. "Because you deserve a fair chance, and I—" He paused, then continued, "I like the idea of showing people the truth. I want to see you keep this place." Tiffany felt a lump in her throat. She had no reason to trust him, but she had no one else. "All right, do what you can. I have some old letters upstairs. My mother wrote things about the mayor long ago. Maybe it will help." Robert nodded. "Great. Show me the letters." She led him inside and up a narrow flight of stairs. In the attic, old boxes and trunks lined the walls. She opened one and pulled out faded envelopes. She spoke quietly. "These letters mention suspicious moves by the mayor even back then. My mother suspected he wanted to drive us out." Robert examined them carefully. "This is something, not hard evidence, but it suggests a pattern. Let me take some notes." He pulled out a small notepad. As he wrote, Tiffany heard distant shouting outside. Someone screamed about toxic water. Another person yelled Tiffany's name in anger. She pressed her lips together, feeling the tension build. Robert tucked the letters back. "I'll go ask around town. Maybe I can find someone who knows more. You stay here and hold on. Don't let anyone push you out." "Wait," Tiffany said. Her voice sounded strained. "If you dig too deep, you might get in trouble. They don't play fair." He gave a small shrug. "I can handle it." "I'm just a photographer, right?" He smiled, trying to ease her nerves. Tiffany managed a nod. "Be careful." Robert headed down the stairs. She followed him as far as the lobby. He walked out the front door and went down the street, camera hidden under his jacket. Tiffany stood by the desk, gripping its edge. She listened to the muffled sounds of an angry crowd forming somewhere nearby. She tried not to panic. She had wanted to give in, to sell and end this pressure. But now Robert had lit a spark of hope. If he could find real proof that the mayor orchestrated all this sabotage, maybe Tiffany could stand her ground. Still, the fear pressed into her chest. Without proof, she would lose everything. She looked around the dim lobby, its old chairs and peeling wallpaper. She touched a photograph of her mother. She remembered the woman's strong stance and her refusal to back down. Tiffany inhaled and steadied herself. There was nothing else to do now except wait and hope Robert came back with something useful. Tiffany stood behind the lobby's front desk, tapping her fingers on the worn wood. She kept looking at the door, waiting for Robert to return. Outside, voices rose and fell, sometimes drifting through the open window. She could not tell if they were angry or just nervous. The old inn felt too quiet now, as if holding its breath. A few minutes later, she heard footsteps on the porch. Tiffany leaned forward, heart pounding. Robert pushed the door open. He looked tired and a bit flushed, as if he had been walking fast. "Any luck?" she asked. Her voice sounded tense. Robert set his camera down and rubbed the back of his neck. "I talked to a few merchants," he said. "They're scared. They said people in hoods have been messing with supplies at night. Some say the mayor pays them. Others say they saw the mayor's assistant near the cistern earlier. They won't go on record, though." Tiffany frowned. "So, nothing concrete?" He shrugged. "I got hints. Also, I spoke to an older shopkeeper. He hinted that the mayor wants your property to build some sort of new complex. The sabotage is meant to scare you into selling." He wouldn't say more. "He's afraid." Tiffany looked down at the desk. "I have these letters, rumors, and now more whispers. But I need proof." Robert nodded. "I know. Let's try another angle." He paused. "What about the photo exhibit idea? If we show people old images of this place, your mother's work, your family's legacy, maybe we can draw attention. If more eyes turn here, the mayor might hesitate." Tiffany tried to imagine people coming to see photos in her battered lobby. It sounded strange, but at this point, she had nothing to lose. "Fine, we can try it. I'll hang some photos and letters in the lobby. Maybe I can print some copies of my mother's old documents. Even if it's small, it might make people think twice." Robert picked up his camera. "I can shoot a few pictures of the inn as it is now, show the wear and tear, but also show its character." "Just don't make it look pathetic," Tiffany said quietly. "I'm trying to keep this place alive." He smiled a bit. "I'll do my best." As he stepped outside to take a few shots, Tiffany sorted through old photos and letters. She selected pictures of her mother standing proudly in front of the inn. Some showed guests laughing, others the porch filled with flowers. Back then, the building looked strong and welcoming. Now it felt like a fortress under siege. She heard Robert return, snapping a few photos inside the lobby. He took shots of the old wooden chairs, the faded curtains, the coffee pot on the counter. He said nothing dramatic, only grunted in approval or adjusted the angle. Tiffany appreciated his calm approach. They worked quietly for a while, arranging photos and letters on a small board near the door. Tiffany used tacks and tape to secure them, making a simple display. After a few minutes, Robert stepped back and examined their work. "It's not fancy," he said, "but it tells a story." Tiffany nodded. "I hope someone cares enough to read it." Suddenly, the door swung open. A city official stepped in, holding a clipboard. He looked around, sniffing the air. Tiffany recognized him as the same one who brought fines before. "You again?" Tiffany said, crossing her arms. "If you're here to threaten me, save your breath." The official raised an eyebrow. "I'm here to inspect. Word on the street is you're harboring unsafe conditions." Robert stepped between them, camera hanging at his side. "This is nonsense," he said. "She's just running her inn. Why do you harass her?" The official sneered. "I'm just doing my job." He walked around, poking at the walls, lifting a chair leg with the tip of his shoe, and scribbling notes. He eyed the display Tiffany made and smirked. Trying to impress the town with old pictures, he asked. Too late. Everyone knows this place is a hazard. Tiffany felt anger rise in her chest. Get out, she said. If you have something official, leave it at the desk. He waved a paper in her face. Here's another notice. More code violations. You have less than a week to fix them or face closure. She snatched the paper. Her voice trembled. You're just following the mayor's orders, she said. You know this is all a setup. The official shrugged. Prove it. He turned and left, the door slamming shut behind him. Tiffany stood still, holding the paper. Her knuckles whitened. Robert approached, speaking softly. We'll find a way, he said. Don't let him get to you. She inhaled slowly. I need something stronger than rumors. If I don't find proof soon, he'll shut this place down. Robert nodded. I'll try talking to more people. Maybe I can catch the mayor meeting his men. If I get photos of him with those vandals, that might help. She considered the risk. Be careful, she said. They're watching me. They might be watching you, too. He looked at her face and nodded. I know, but I won't let them scare me off. Tiffany reached for the door. She looked outside at the empty street. The morning had passed into early afternoon. No visitors, no help, just tension and fear. But Robert remained by her side, and that gave her a small measure of strength. She walked back to the display on the wall. She straightened a photograph of her mother. She made sure everything looked neat. If anyone came to see, they would learn the truth of what this place once was and what it could be again. She just needed time to prove it mattered. Late afternoon light fell across the inn's front porch. Tiffany stepped outside, broom in hand, and swept bits of dried leaves and paint chips from the boards. The inn felt silent. She had no customers. She wondered if anyone would show up to see the photos she had displayed. The tension in town felt thick. She glanced down the street and saw no one but a stray cat crossing the road. She heard footsteps behind her. Turning, she saw Robert standing near the doorway, his jacket zipped and his camera hidden inside. He looked determined. I'm going to see what I can find out, Robert said. I'll try the side streets and the old warehouses. Maybe I can get photos of these vandals talking to the mayor's men. Tiffany gripped the broom handle. Just be careful, she said. If they catch you spying, it won't be good. Robert nodded and slipped away. Tiffany watched him vanish around a corner. She stood there a moment, feeling uneasy. She re-entered the lobby and paced back and forth. The old floorboards creaked. She thought about calling out to neighbors for help, but most of them avoided her now. Outside, a muffled crash sounded. Tiffany rushed to the window and saw nothing. She returned to the porch and looked around. The street lay empty. She smelled fresh paint drifting from somewhere nearby. Someone had been leaving threatening messages here and there. It all felt designed to break her down. She walked back inside and straightened a chair. She noticed one of the framed photos on the display had slid slightly off its tack. She adjusted it, remembering how proud her mother looked in that image. Her mother had always said to hold on, even when no one believed in you. As dusk approached, Tiffany lit a small lamp in the lobby. She expected Robert to come back soon, but he did not appear. The silence stretched. She listened for voices outside. Only distant murmurs reached her ears, too faint to understand. She tapped her foot, considering whether to lock the door for the night or wait longer. After what felt like hours, she heard footsteps on the side alley. She rushed to open the back door. Robert stepped in, breathing a bit hard. He wiped sweat from his forehead. "Did you find anything?" Tiffany asked, her voice low. Robert nodded, and pulled out a small packet from inside his jacket. "Photos and notes," he said. "I got close enough to see a few men meeting near an abandoned shed. I recognized one of them as working for the mayor. They talked about dumping chemicals near the cistern and breaking windows at certain stores." Tiffany's eyes widened. "You're sure?" He held up a set of quick snapshots. "Blurry, but you can recognize the faces if you know them. I also have a piece of paper I found on the ground. It has dates and codes. I think it's a schedule of sabotage." Tiffany's hands trembled as she took the photos. They were dark and grainy. She saw a familiar face, one of the mayor's cronies. She saw men exchanging small bags and pointing toward the center of town. It was not a signed confession, but it was more than rumors. "This could help," she said. "If I confront the mayor with this, he can't deny it's his men. He'll have to back off." Robert sighed. "We have to be smart. If we show him too soon, he might destroy evidence or pressure witnesses. We should prepare first, maybe gather more. But time is running out." Tiffany nodded. "I can't afford to wait too long. They're already fining me into the ground. I have to make a stand." Robert paced the room, looking tense. "What if we set a trap? If we tell the mayor we know, show him a taste of these photos, maybe he'll slip up or back down right away. We have to do it in person, not through intermediaries." Tiffany thought it over. "We can confront him here in the morning. He comes by sometimes to check if I've changed my mind. I'll show him the pictures and demand he leave me alone." Robert stopped pacing and faced her. "You think he'll listen?" She shrugged. "If he doesn't, I'll make them public. I can't lose more than I already have." She swallowed hard. "I have no power but the truth." Robert approached and spoke quietly. "All right. In the morning, we confront him. I'll stay out of sight at first, in case he tries something. But I'll be here." Tiffany nodded, her heart pounding. She set the photos and the note on a table, weighing them down with a small paperweight. She looked around the inn, at its worn walls and creaky furniture. She remembered how her mother never flinched in the face of adversity. Tiffany had run out of options. This was the moment to fight back. A sudden knock at the front door made her jump. She turned off the lamp and stepped forward. Robert moved behind the desk, ready to hide the evidence. Tiffany opened the door a crack and saw no one. She stepped onto the porch and found a folded piece of paper under a chair. It read, "Last chance. Sell or regret it." She tore it up and threw it into a trash bin. She locked the door and faced Robert in the dim lobby. "It's getting worse," she whispered. "They know we're not giving in easily." Robert frowned. "Let them come. We're done playing nice. Tomorrow morning, we show the mayor what we've got." Tiffany nodded. "Yes, tomorrow." They settled in for the night, checking the locks, placing the evidence in a safe spot, and waiting out the darkness. Tiffany tried to sleep in a small room near the lobby. She kept one ear open, listening for trouble. Robert sat near a window, alert, camera ready. The night passed slowly, but they knew the confrontation was coming soon. The rest of the night passed slowly. Tiffany stayed near the lobby, her back against the wall, eyes on the front door. Robert paced near the window, checking outside every few minutes. The street stayed quiet, but the silence made them nervous. They both knew dawn would bring a decisive moment. Around midnight, Robert turned to Tiffany and spoke in a low voice. "I'm going to see if I can find more proof. Maybe the men are still out there somewhere. If I get clearer photos, it will leave no doubt." Tiffany's heart jumped. "Are you sure? It's dangerous." He nodded. "I'll be careful. Lock the door behind me. Don't open for anyone unless you recognize my voice." She hesitated, then agreed. "Fine. Just come back safe." Robert slipped out, and Tiffany bolted the door. She sat on a stool behind the desk, arms crossed, breathing slowly. She could not sleep now. She had to be ready if anyone tried to break in. She glanced at the pictures and documents they had gathered. This might be all they needed, but Robert wanted more. She understood. The mayor could try to deny what they had. Minutes dragged by. Tiffany heard distant footsteps, maybe a cat scurrying down the alley. She checked the locks twice. The old floorboards creaked each time she shifted her weight. She tried to ignore her pounding heart. About an hour later, a soft knock sounded at the back door. Tiffany froze. She moved quietly toward it, pressing her ear to the wood. "Tiffany," Robert whispered. "It's me." She let him in and locked the door again. He slipped inside, breathing hard. He placed his camera and a folded sheet of paper on the desk. Tiffany noticed sweat on his forehead. "What happened?" she asked. Robert pulled a small flashlight from his pocket and shone it on the paper. "I found them talking in a back alley behind an old workshop. I got closer this time. They mentioned the mayor by name. They discussed when to cut off the water supply again. I snapped a few photos from behind a crate. Then I saw this paper on the ground. It's a list of tasks, with initials matching known thugs in town." He spread out the photos he had taken. They were a bit clearer than before. In one, a well-known associate of the mayor handed a folded envelope to a rough-looking man. In another, two men stood next to a pile of tools that could be used to break windows or tamper with pipes. In the background, an outline of the mayor's silhouette could be recognized if you knew his profile and the way he dressed. Tiffany studied them. "This might be enough," she said quietly. "They can't claim this is random. Your photos show them exchanging money and planning something." Robert nodded, catching his breath. "I hope so. If the mayor tries to deny it, we'll threaten to show these photos to every shopkeeper in town." "He won't risk that." Tiffany touched his arm. "Thank you," she said. "I know this wasn't easy." He shrugged, lowering his voice. "I wanted to help. You deserve better than these threats." Tiffany backed up and looked at the dark lobby. It felt late. She wondered how many hours until sunrise. "We confront him in the morning," she said firmly. Robert agreed. "Yes, we can't give them more time to act. He probably expects you to surrender soon. Let's surprise him." They organized the evidence. Tiffany placed the clearest photos in one folder and the original documents and letters in another. They would show the mayor the harsh facts. No yelling, no threats, just the truth laid out in front of him. If he had any sense of self-preservation, he would back off. Robert pulled a chair near the window and sat, watching the street. Tiffany tried to rest her eyes, sitting behind the desk, arms folded on it. She could not sleep, but she tried to ease her breathing. Outside, a soft breeze rattled a loose shutter. No other sounds reached them. The tension pressed down like a heavy weight. Time passed slowly. Tiffany got up once to drink some water from an old bottle in the back room. The water tasted stale, but it cleared her throat. She returned and found Robert still at the window, silent and focused. "You should try to rest too," Tiffany said quietly. He shook his head. "I'm fine. Once this is over, maybe we can both sleep." She managed a small nod. The inn felt like a fortress tonight. Doors locked, secrets inside. The difference now was that they had a plan and something solid to confront the mayor with. After a while, The sky began to lighten. Tiffany noticed a faint glow around the edge of the window. She stood, stretching her stiff arms and legs. Robert stood as well, tucking the evidence into a leather folder. "Almost time," he said quietly. Tiffany checked the porch through a small gap in the curtains. No sign of the mayor yet, but she knew he would come. He always did, popping by to see if she had changed her mind. This time, he would find her ready. She inhaled and adjusted her shirt. Her legs felt shaky, but she steadied them. Robert placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Ready?" he asked. Tiffany nodded. "Ready? When he comes, I'll show him everything. If he denies it, I'll threaten to spread it all over town. He'll have no choice." Robert gave a short nod. "I'll stand in the back. Let you handle it. If he tries to run, I'll get a clear shot of his reaction." Tiffany fixed her eyes on the door, waiting. The morning air would bring him. She was sure of it. At sunrise, Tiffany stood near the lobby's door, watching through a small gap in the curtain. The street looked empty. She knew the mayor liked to appear unannounced, catching people off guard. Robert stayed a few steps behind her, arms crossed, camera ready. They did not speak much. There was nothing left to say until he showed up. About an hour later, Tiffany spotted a familiar figure at the far end of the street. It was the mayor, walking slowly in his tidy suit. He stopped twice, looking at the inn's facade, then continued forward. Tiffany cleared her throat. "He's coming," she said quietly. Robert nodded and stepped to the side, half hidden by a corner near the display of old photos. Tiffany unlocked the door and stood in the lobby, waiting. She wanted no confusion. He would walk right in, as he often did. She would show him the evidence. Simple. The mayor reached the porch. The boards creaked as he stepped on them. He knocked once, then opened the door without waiting for an answer. Tiffany stood behind the desk, a folder on top. She spoke in a steady voice. "Good morning, Mayor," she said. "You're here early." He stepped inside, adjusting his jacket. He glanced around, taking in the display of photos on the wall and the neat arrangement of documents on the desk. He sniffed, pretending to be unimpressed. "Tiffany," he said, trying to sound casual. "I came to check if you've reconsidered my offer. I heard there have been more problems. It might be wise to sell before anything else happens." Tiffany placed a hand on the folder and looked him in the eye. "No," she said, "I haven't reconsidered. Actually, I have something to show you." The mayor raised an eyebrow. "Something to show me? I hope it's not more of these old pictures. You know, history won't save a building that's falling apart." Tiffany opened the folder and laid out a few photographs. She tapped one with her finger. It showed two of the mayor's known associates passing envelopes to a group of men. Another showed those men with tools near a vandalized storefront. The mayor's eyes narrowed as he studied them. "What is this?" he asked, voice tense. "It's proof," Tiffany said calmly. "Proof that you or your people are behind the sabotage in town. You've been trying to scare me into selling this inn. You've been paying these men to break windows, contaminate water, and spread rumors." The mayor's face stiffened. He glanced around the lobby, noticing Robert now, camera in hand. He forced a weak laugh. "This means nothing," he said, tapping the photos. "Anyone could have staged this. Blurry images don't prove a thing." Tiffany slid another set of photos forward, slightly clearer. She also placed the scrap of paper Robert found, showing dates and names. "These men work for you. Everyone knows it. If I show these to the townspeople, they will recognize your friends. They will see the pattern." The mayor swallowed, his eyes darting from Tiffany to Robert. His confident smirk faded. He tried to straighten his posture, but his voice lost its swagger. "You're making wild accusations." Tiffany leaned in. "No, I'm telling you to back off. Stop sending your men to vandalize and harass me. Cancel those fines and leave me alone. If you don't, I'll share these photos and documents with everyone in town. They'll know exactly what you've done." Robert lifted his camera, pointing it casually at the mayor. "I'm recording this conversation," he said flatly, "in case you deny what's happening." The mayor's eyes widened for a second. He hesitated, then put on a fake smile. "You have no reason to do that. I'm not admitting anything. But let's say we come to an understanding. Perhaps I can withdraw the fines, ease the restrictions. There's no need to involve the public in these matters." Tiffany felt her heartbeat slow. She had him cornered. She nodded. "That's all I want," she said. "I'm not asking for money. I'm not asking for favors. Just leave me and my inn in peace. Let me run it as I see fit." The mayor shifted his feet. His voice turned quiet. "Fine, I can do that. I'll tell my people to stand down. You'll see no more trouble." Robert snapped a photo. The mayor flinched at the flash. He pressed his lips together, trying to regain control of his expression. "No need for more pictures," he said sharply. Tiffany collected the photos and placed them back in the folder. "If I see one more sign of sabotage, I'll show these to everyone. Understand?" The mayor nodded slowly. "I understand." He turned to leave, his shoulders stiff. When he opened the door, he glanced back once more, trying to appear calm. "You should still consider upgrading this place," he said in a forced tone. "It's old and unsafe." Tiffany said nothing. She watched him go. Once he was off the porch, she locked the door behind him. Her legs trembled slightly as she walked back to the desk. She looked at Robert, who lowered the camera. "That went better than I expected," Robert said quietly. Tiffany nodded. "He won't stop being who he is, but at least he won't push me around anymore. We have the proof. He knows we can ruin him if he tries anything." Robert leaned against the wall, relief washing over his face. "So what now?" Tiffany shrugged. "Now we keep going. I'll fix what I can. The inn stays mine. Maybe things will calm down in town." She took a deep breath and stepped toward the display on the wall. The photos and letters would remain there, a reminder of what she had fought for. She touched the edge of one picture and felt a small sense of satisfaction. A few hours passed. Tiffany stood at the lobby window and watched the street. She saw no sign of the mayor or his men. The tension in her chest had eased. She touched the desk and ran her hand along its edge, feeling every dent and scratch. The place still looked worn out, but it was hers. Robert sat in a chair near the door, arms folded, watching quietly. He glanced at Tiffany. "It's quiet out there," he said. "No more visitors." Tiffany nodded. "Good. I'm tired of fights and threats. Let's hope it stays this way." They had not announced any grand victory. There was no reason to call attention to what happened. The mayor knew he had been caught. He would keep his distance now. That was all Tiffany wanted. She walked to the makeshift display on the wall, where old photos and letters hung. She straightened a picture of her mother standing by the inn's porch years ago. The wood looked newer back then. The paint was fresh, and the sign clearly read, "Robert's Inn." Tiffany smiled slightly. Her mother's posture was confident, her chin raised. Tiffany felt closer to that memory now. Robert cleared his throat. "What's next for you?" he asked. You have your inn back under your control. Do you plan to reopen fully? Invite guests? Repair things? Tiffany shrugged. I'll keep doing what I've always done. Fix what I can. Keep the doors open to travelers. I don't expect a sudden rush of guests, but at least no one will sabotage me anymore. Robert nodded. I might stay a few more days if that's all right. I'd like to help you tidy up a bit. I owe you that much. Tiffany smiled a bit. Thanks. That would help. I could use an extra pair of hands. They spent part of the afternoon checking rooms and making small repairs. Robert tightened loose screws on chairs and replaced a broken curtain rod. Tiffany swept dust from corners she had ignored for weeks. The place still looked old, but with each small fix, it felt steadier. Outside, the sun moved slowly across the sky. Occasionally, Tiffany spotted a neighbor passing by. Some paused, looking at the inn with curiosity. None came in to complain or accuse her. Maybe word had spread that the mayor backed off. Maybe people sensed a change. After a while, Tiffany and Robert sat at a small table in the lobby. She poured them each a cup of fresh coffee. It tasted slightly bitter, but at least it was not stale like before. Robert took a sip and nodded. Not bad, he said. Tiffany smirked. I'll work on improving that too. Silence settled between them. Neither seemed to mind. Tiffany felt calmer now than she had in weeks. She glanced at Robert's camera resting on the table. You never told me exactly why you came here in the first place, she said. Not in detail, I mean. Robert tilted his head. I travel a lot, taking photos for small magazines. I heard there were old inns and hidden histories here. I just picked your place by chance. It looked honest, even if worn down. Tiffany nodded. Honest, that's one way to put it. She sipped her coffee. I guess you got more than you bargained for. This wasn't just old history. You got dragged into a fight. Robert shrugged. I'm not sorry. You deserved better than what they were trying to do. I'm glad I could help. Besides, I got some interesting material. Even if I don't publish it, I have a story to remember. Tiffany set her cup down. I appreciate it. Without your photos and digging, I'd have caved under their pressure. She paused. I had nothing else. Robert leaned forward. You had your will. Your mother's legacy kept you going. I just added some evidence. Tiffany breathed in. The stale smell was fading now, replaced by the aroma of fresh coffee. The lobby felt less oppressive. She stood and walked around slowly, looking at the old chairs and framed pictures. The place was not perfect, but it was her home. Outside, no shouts or threats echoed. The day passed quietly. She knew the mayor still held power in town, but he would keep away. He had been forced to back down. Without an easy target, he would move on to something else. Tiffany's future was hers to shape now, even if it remained modest. As the afternoon turned into early evening, Tiffany and Robert fixed a loose board on the porch. They worked side by side, hammering nails, wiping sweat from their brows. When they finished, Tiffany tested the board with her foot. That's better, she said. No more tripping on it. Robert looked up and down the street. A few people walked past, glancing their way but saying nothing. It felt normal, ordinary. Tiffany preferred it that way. No one needed to know every detail of what happened here. Silence meant peace. They went back inside. Tiffany turned on a small lamp as darkness approached. She placed the evidence they had gathered in a safe place, out of sight. There was no need to wave it around anymore. It was her insurance. Should the mayor ever try something again? Robert sat at the table and flipped through an old magazine. Tiffany adjusted a curtain, making sure it closed properly. She ran a cloth over the desk's surface, removing a thin layer of dust. Each action felt small but meaningful, restoring normalcy to a place that had nearly fallen apart. The hours passed without incident. Tiffany no longer felt the knot of fear in her stomach. She remembered the mayor's face when confronted with the photos. He had looked shaken, not the arrogant figure she knew. That image gave her confidence. She had faced him and won. Tiffany woke early the next morning. She stepped into the lobby and opened the door. Fresh air drifted in. She listened for any suspicious noises, but the street sounded calm. No scraping, no murmurs, no hostile whispers. She moved onto the porch and tested the new board they had fixed. It held firm. Robert entered from behind, rubbing sleep from his eyes. He looked down the street. A few people walked by, heading to their shops. They looked in Tiffany's direction and gave brief nods. Some showed a neutral expression, neither friendly nor hostile. It seemed the tension had eased. Tiffany crossed her arms. "It's quieter now," she said. "No one's yelling at me or blaming me for nonsense." Robert nodded. "The mayor must have told his men to back off. They probably won't harass you anymore." They stepped inside, and Tiffany decided to organize the storage room. She pulled out old linens, checked for mildew, and set aside what needed washing. Robert helped carry a few boxes. They worked without rush. There were no urgent threats, no pressing fear. By midday, Tiffany had reorganized the closet and aired out a couple of spare rooms. The place still showed signs of age, but it felt more welcoming. She dusted the frames on the wall, those old photos of her mother, the letters and documents that had proved useful. Now, they just served as a quiet tribute. Robert suggested they take a short walk around the block. Tiffany agreed. She locked the inn, and they strolled past neighboring buildings. Most people they passed did not comment on recent events. They nodded, said hello, and went about their business. Tiffany noticed fewer rumors hanging in the air. The town looked normal again. They stopped at a small bakery. Tiffany bought 2 rolls, and they ate outside, leaning against a low fence. Robert bit into his bread and looked around. "It's nice," he said. "Peaceful?" Tiffany finished her roll and wiped crumbs from her mouth. "Yes, it is." She paused, then added, "I never wanted to cause trouble. I just wanted to keep my inn. Now I can do that without someone breathing down my neck." Robert nodded. "You handled it well. I'm impressed." They walked back to the inn, carrying a small bag of extra rolls. Tiffany placed them on the lobby desk and poured 2 cups of coffee. She tasted it. It seemed fresher than before. Without the stress, she had more energy to maintain simple things. "Are you staying in town long?" Tiffany asked, handing Robert his cup. He shrugged. "A day or 2 more, then I'll move on. I travel often. But I might visit again. Now that I've seen what this place is about, I'd like to see it thrive." Tiffany gave a small nod. "You're always welcome here. If you return, you'll find it in better shape." After their break, Tiffany spent some time replacing a burned-out light bulb in the hallway. Robert checked the window frames, making sure none were loose. These small repairs felt like steps toward stability. No mayor, no threats, just quiet improvements. Later in the afternoon, a neighbor stopped by. It was a man who once glared at Tiffany from across the street. He tapped on the doorframe, took off his hat, and looked around. "I just wanted to say," he began, clearing his throat. "I'm sorry for believing those rumors. Heard you stood up to the mayor. That took guts." Tiffany raised her eyebrows. "Thanks," she said simply. She did not want to dwell on the past. "We're fine now." The man nodded and left. Robert watched from behind the desk. "People are noticing," he said. "They know you didn't give in, and you didn't stoop to their level." Tiffany shrugged. "I just did what I had to do." As the evening approached, they brought out a small lamp to light the lobby. Tiffany decided to serve a simple dinner, just bread and butter, with some leftover soup she managed to heat up. She and Robert ate quietly, seated at the small table. Through the open window, they heard distant laughter, perhaps from a family gathering somewhere. The inn felt safe. The tension that once pressed Tiffany's chest was gone. She still had debts and repairs to consider, but no one was threatening to sabotage her. No strange letters, no paint on the porch, no broken chairs caused by outsiders. She could handle normal problems. Robert leaned back. "I'll send a few postcards to some friends who travel," he said. "Might bring you a guest or two eventually." Tiffany smiled. "That would be nice. Don't expect a grand hotel. It's always going to be simple here." He nodded. "Simple is good. Honest is good." They cleaned the dishes and put them away. Tiffany checked the locks on the doors, out of habit. The night settled in, quiet and steady. She turned off unnecessary lights to save on costs. The inn's old floors creaked softly as she moved down the hallway. She listened to the silence, grateful it was not broken by forced whispers or threats. In the lobby, Robert arranged his belongings, preparing for his eventual departure. He did not say exactly when he would leave, but Tiffany guessed it would be soon. She accepted that. He had done enough. She would not hold him back. Outside, a light breeze moved through the street, carrying faint scents of cooking fires and distant fields. Tiffany stood at the door for a moment, hands on her hips, looking out. She knew she would continue serving coffee, tidying rooms, and welcoming travelers. The inn remained modest, but now it stood free from the mayor's grip. She closed the door and walked back inside, ending the day without fear. On the next morning, Tiffany awoke and entered the lobby. She felt rested. Outside, a pale sun lit the quiet street. She straightened a few chairs and wiped dust from the desk. Everything felt settled. She stepped onto the porch and looked both ways. No suspicious figures, no lurking strangers, just the faint hum of distant activity. Robert joined her after a while, carrying his small travel bag. He had packed his camera and notes. Tiffany leaned against the porch railing, waiting for him to speak first. "I think I'll get going," he said, adjusting the strap on his shoulder. "I've stayed longer than I planned, and I have other places to visit." Tiffany nodded. "I understand. Thanks for all your help." She paused. "You know, you're always welcome here. If you ever pass through again, you have a place to stay." Robert gave a slight smile. "I appreciate that. You have a good inn, Tiffany. It's quiet, honest, and it matters. Don't let anyone take it from you." She watched him walk down the porch steps and head along the street. He moved casually, as if he belonged everywhere and nowhere at once. When he reached the corner, he turned, waved briefly, then disappeared from view. Tiffany stared at the empty spot for a moment before going back inside. In the lobby, she organized the documents and photos that once served as evidence. She placed them in a locked drawer. She felt no need to look at them now. They had done their job. The mayor would not bother her again. A soft knock at the door startled her. When she opened it, she found a middle-aged woman carrying a small basket of apples. The woman introduced herself as a local vendor who ran a fruit stand down the road. "I heard you were still open," the woman said. "I thought maybe I'd bring these apples by, fresh from my orchard. Maybe your guests would like some." Tiffany accepted the basket, surprised. "That's kind of you. Thanks." The woman nodded and left. Tiffany placed the apples on a small plate in the lobby. This small gesture felt like a sign of normal life returning. No drama, no threats, just everyday kindness. Throughout the morning, Tiffany handled simple tasks. She checked a loose doorknob, swept the floor, and cleaned a dusty window. The inn remained modest, a place for travelers to rest, not a center of attention. She preferred it that way. In the early afternoon, a stranger arrived. He was a tired-looking man with a worn backpack. He asked if there was a room for the night. Tiffany offered him one without hesitation. He paid quietly, took his key, and went upstairs. A normal transaction, just like it should be. Later, while wiping the counter, Tiffany felt a calm satisfaction. She had not gained wealth or fame. The mayor still held office somewhere in town, but he would not interfere again. She had shown him that she would not be bullied. She had exposed his tactics. Now they moved on with their lives separately. The hours passed uneventfully. Tiffany smiled at the sound of the guest walking down the hallway, the soft creak of the stairs, the distant murmur of someone passing in the street. She breathed easier now, knowing no one waited outside to scare her. In the evening, she brewed a fresh pot of coffee. She tasted it. It was still a bit bitter, but that was fine. She could improve it over time. She sat at the table in the lobby and sipped slowly. The inn's old walls, chipped paint, and creaky floors no longer bothered her. They were part of this place's character. She thought about her mother. The old photographs remained on the wall, reminding her of the past. Her mother had faced hardships too. Life had never been perfect here. But they had always found a way forward. Tiffany understood that now more than ever. When darkness fell, she lit a small lamp. She walked through the empty rooms, making sure all was in order. The guest slept quietly upstairs. Outside, a gentle breeze moved through the street, carrying distant voices from nearby houses. Nothing sounded threatening. She returned to the lobby and stood by the front door. She leaned her forehead against the cool surface, listening. The quiet night offered no surprises. She locked the door, confident that no one would break in or paint nasty messages anymore. In the silence, she remembered Robert. Without him, she would have folded under the mayor's schemes. He had appeared out of nowhere and believed in her cause. He had taken risks to prove what she already knew, that she was being targeted unfairly. Now he was gone, moving on to other places. She respected that. He was free, and so was she. Tiffany moved away from the door and turned off unnecessary lights. She slipped into a small room near the lobby that served as her bedroom. Before lying down, she opened a window and glanced outside. A faint glow from a distant lamppost revealed empty sidewalks. Everyone was at home, resting. She closed the window, feeling a calm she had not felt in a long time. Tomorrow, she would wake up, serve coffee, and maybe greet another traveler passing through. No one would threaten her legacy again. She had proven her point. The inn stood as it always had. Simple, worn, but firmly hers. She lay down and let the quiet fill her mind. Outside, the town carried on, and inside, she held on to her future without fear. If you enjoyed this story, don't miss the next one. Just click on the screen.